With me now is Emma Kell, who's been a teacher for more than 20 years, and who's recently written a book called How to Survive in Teaching. Also with me is Aisha Small, who's a former teacher who left the profession after experiencing several mental health issues and has now written a book called The Unexpected Leader. And finally, Sinead McBrearty is the CEO of the Education Support Partnership, a charity which supports people within education. Good evening to you all. Aisha, we heard from those teachers, also the head of Ofsted, saying it's the workload. The workload is just too much to bear, and that's what it took its toll on you.
Yeah, interestingly, my experience mirrors what the Ofsted report says, actually. So at the time that I had a breakdown, I was a middle leader in a school, I was a subject leader, and I was also about 5 to 7 years into my teaching career. And I was working in a school that was rated RI, so it requires improvement. And all of those things together helped to create a condition that was too difficult for me to sustain.
What happened exactly, and how did that breakdown, how did it come about?
Well, it's funny to think about it now, but at the time it was terrible. I remember going in, it probably seems quite odd, but it actually happened in September, which doesn't necessarily make that much sense. So I remember going into the hall, and we had, teachers always have like a briefing after summer holidays. And the head teacher stood up, and I basically realised I couldn't go through another year like the one I just had. And I walked out of the hall and started crying in the car park. It was very difficult time for me, but it was because I realised how difficult the previous year had been, and it had been successful in many ways. So my department had got the best ever results for the school, but I just realised that I couldn't possibly do that all over again for a whole year.
And Emma, you also sadly had to deal with mental health issues as well. Just explain what happened with you.
Yeah, I mean, for the vast majority of my career, I've been extremely lucky, but I did have one particular year when I was working in a school with a very high level of presenteeism. So, you know, it was being seen to be at school till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night was the norm. You'd get sort of tutted at and frowned upon if you tried to leave at 4 o'clock. And the pressure, also an RI school like Aisha's, and the pressure to raise results constantly was there, and that had a massive effect on my family. I remember driving home. My phone had run out of battery, and my mum was waiting for me at home with my 2 very young children, babies at the time, and just driving along these country lanes thinking, I'm going to have an accident, but I've got to get home because my mum's going to be so worried. And I've been stuck in these meetings until, I think, after 8 o'clock at night.
I mean, that scrubs out all the myths about, you know, easy life, you finish school at 3:30, what can you complain about? You have been in the industry, in the profession for more than 20 years, and you said for most of that you've been fine. What happened? What changed?
Well, I think it's all about context, isn't it? I think that a lot of it depends on the quality of school leadership and the culture you're working in. The Ofsted grading of a school and the pressure to improve can be a big factor as well. But for me, I mean, what changed for the better was advice from others about finding a school that suits you, that suits your own values, your own ethics, and actually a school which treats people as human beings rather than just as teachers. So that humanity. So making a decision to move on and actually find myself, I actually took a little bit of time out. I went part-time, sort of stepped away a little bit. But when I was actually ready to go back in full-time, it was really important to me to actually meet the head, talk to the head, realise that actually that person very much shared the same values as I did. And actually then I was very, very happy for a very long time. But never that, yeah.
I mean, Sinead, you wouldn't be surprised by Aisha's and Emma's stories. And in fact, you weren't surprised by the results from this research as well.
No, the results from this research echo what we find in our own research and also from the helpline. So we run a helpline where anyone working in education in any role can call us up and speak to a counsellor and access up to 6 sessions of counselling to help them with a particular issue that they're experiencing. We get an awful lot of people coming through who are experiencing anxiety and depression and significantly worse. And what we've noticed over the past 2 years is that the volume of calls we take has gone up dramatically, but also the severity of issues that people are presenting with has shocked us at how much it has risen by.
So if you have teachers dealing with these immense issues to the extent it becomes a mental health problem, how on earth does this affect the children, the kids?
Well, this is one of the really important points to land with everybody out there, whether they're a policymaker or a parent, is that whilst it's very important that we look after the grown-ups for their own sake, Actually, we know that one of the key things that will affect a pupil's outcome is the relationship with a teacher. And if that teacher is feeling under pressure and stress and is not well, they simply can't do the job we're asking them to do. They can't connect with the child in the way they otherwise would. And so this is a really significant issue for the whole of society.
Aisha, what did you see in the class in terms of how you were affected the children?
Well, I'd like to make a wider point about the type of school that I worked in. I worked in a school that requires improvement, which in many ways was a great school and I loved working there. I also echo Emma's experience in that I went to another school and was very, very happy and stayed in teaching for longer. But the teachers in schools that requires improvement or inadequate are more likely to have poor mental health issues. And that is a big problem. In the report, Ofsted doesn't really mention much about that. And also the other important thing is that in schools that are rated inadequate or RI are more likely to be in disadvantaged areas. So there's a correlation or there's a link between our most vulnerable children, the teachers teaching them and the stress that they're feeling. And I think that's something that could have been addressed more in the report. Really.
No, of course, and it's such a shame it wasn't, because those kind of jobs, even though you are working in schools which does require improvement, they can be the most rewarding.
We should be rewarding the teachers who choose to work in those kind of schools. We really should.
Emma, what did you see in the classroom in terms of the effect it had on children?
Yeah, well, one of the issues that I felt wasn't explored much in the report was the whole teacher attrition rate, so the rate of teachers actually leaving the profession and the impact that has on young people. Because actually, when you meet young people who've had 5 or 6 maths teachers in the last 2 years, the effect on them is profound. I work at secondary level and it's all about the relationships. You know, the students need to know they've got someone stable and there for them in the classroom. And if their teachers are changing constantly, that for them actually creates a huge amount of insecurity.
And both of you have mentioned just how rewarding it is and how much you love it. And that was one thing that was pointed out in the research, just how overwhelmingly teachers do love their jobs.